2021, which I now declare open. Although members of the public can't join us in person tonight, our meetings do remain open to the public via the live stream on our website. I extend a warm welcome to all of you who are watching this evening, and on behalf of our councillors and staff at the City of Moonee Valley, I welcome you back for hopefully a better 2021. Before we commence proceedings this evening, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which Moonee Valley is located, the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and we pay our respects to their spirits, ancestors, community members and elders past, present and emerging. We also extend this respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Councillors, I have received an apology for tonight's meeting from Councillor Sharpe. So can I please have a motion that the apology from Councillor Sharpe be noted? Moved Councillor Byrne. Seconder, Councillor Sharpe. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. Councillors, can I now please have a mover and a seconder that the minutes from the council meeting held on Tuesday the 8th of December 2020 be confirmed? Moved Councillor Bedio, seconded Councillor Hodgson. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. Councillors, we now move to item 5, declarations of conflicts of interest, and I'll ask if any councillor has a conflict of interest in any item on the agenda this evening. Councillor Isa.
Mayor, thank you. I'd like to declare a general conflict of interest with item 11.5 due to a perception that this matter may cause a conflict with private interests in a community arts organisation.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Do we have any other councillors with a conflict of interest on any item on the agenda tonight? If not, we'll move to item 6, presentations. Councillors, do we have any presentations this evening? There being none, we'll move to 7, petitions and joint letters. Councillors, do we have any petitions or joint letters being tabled tonight? There being none, we will now move to item 8, public question time. And we've received one question from the community for tonight's meeting. Now, as we do not have residents in the public gallery tonight, I propose that we move to suspend the provisions of our governance rules, requiring questioners to be present in the gallery. That will enable me to read the question that has been submitted and for the CEO to read the responses. So, councillors, can I please have a mover that Council resolves to suspend the public question provisions in its governance rules to allow questions from the gallery to be read by the Mayor and responses read out by the CEO for this meeting. Moved Councillor Tyson, seconded Councillor Adams. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. So tonight's question comes from Logan Shield of Moonee Valley Sustainability. And I'll read his question, and these are his words. The federal government's $1.5 billion local roads and community infrastructure program specifically allocated nearly $4.2 million to Moonee Valley. Projects that would contribute to reducing emissions and creating a more sustainable city, such as bike lanes, tree planting, EV charging stations and building upgrades, were all eligible. Has MVCC accessed this funding? If so, what will it be used for? If not, why was the funding not applied for or granted? So I'll now pass to our CEO, Helen Swee, to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council has been allocated a maximum of $3.73 million under the federal government's new local road and community infrastructure recovery program. The extension of the program from the Roads to Recovery funding means Council has the opportunity to include community infrastructure projects that the Roads to Recovery program deemed ineligible. The funding has stringent project delivery timeframes, with projects leading to be completed this calendar year, which must also be pre-approved by the federal government. Officers are reviewing approved capital projects and defining projects as part of the 2021-22 capital budget. Council will consider all sustainability options that meet the funding requirements. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen, and thank you, Logan, for your question. We will now move to item 9, reports from delegated committees. Do we have any reports from delegated committees? No? There being none, we'll now move to item 10.1, Council Report on 241 Pascoe Vale Road, Essendon, Lot 1, TP 3998878H, and Lot 2, LP 51048, being for the construction of 8 dwellings, reduction in car parking requirements, and create and alter access to a road in a road zone category 1. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Sharpe.
Thank you, Mayor. Move the officer's recommendation.
Councillors, do I have a seconder? Councillor Adams. Councillor Sharpe, would you like to speak to this item?
Yes, thank you. This application is for 8 dwellings on Pascoe Vale Road. It is quite a large site. Obviously, Pascoe Vale Road is a main arterial road. I also note that the location is on the public transport network, buses, trains and the like close by, and pretty much complies with Res Code and all other relevant provisions, so I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation as noted.
Thank you, Councillor Sharpe. Councillor Adams, as the seconder, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just happy to move the support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Isa?
I'll also support the motion, although just it is a bit disappointing that the planning scheme doesn't provide higher thresholds for garden areas and permeability in a development like this. And the other point I just wanted to perhaps mention is around the colour scheme. There was a really interesting article at the weekend talking about how dark colours in urban design are contributing to the absorption of heat and contributing to the increase in urban heat. And it's not something that's yet built into the planning scheme in any way. This particular design is quite dark. It's the sort of design that where whether it's light coloured or dark coloured probably doesn't matter so much, and just perhaps it's something that our planners could look to in the future, to just suggest to applicants that dark colours are actually having an impact in terms of climate, and that's now being documented quite widely, and something that might be worth putting to applicants in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? I don't believe there was dissent, so I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. We'll move to item 10.2, which is the Sport and Recreation Victoria grant funding opportunities. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Sharpe.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move the motion just with one slight amendment, which reads, Council resolves to A, endorse the grant submission for the Strathnava Sports Ground redevelopment under the World Games Facilities Fund program and commit to delivery of the project in 21-22. B, resubmit the J.A. Fullerton Community Pavilion project under the Community Sports Infrastructure Stimulus Program and commit to commence delivery of the project in 21-22. And an additional point C, the delivery of both recommendation A and B is subject to the receipt of appropriate funding for each project.
Thank you, Councillor Sharpe. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Adams. Councillor Sharpe, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you. I'll touch on the J.A. Fullerton Pavilion first. Obviously, re-elected councillors will remember that this pavilion was put forward at the last funding round of the Community Sports Infrastructure Program last year, and unfortunately missed out, I believe only by a very, very slight margin. So I'm extremely pleased that we are able to resubmit under this Community Sports Infrastructure Stimulus Program again. So I certainly hope that that in particular this pavilion is awarded these funds, because it's in dire need. I think we're all in agreement that it's in dire need of a new build there at JA Fullerton. Also, just touching on the Strathnava Sports Ground redevelopment, just before Christmas we endorsed the soccer strategy, and I look forward to seeing that report. But obviously anything we can do to help in the world of soccer and getting the turf up to scratch, this World Games Facilities Fund is providing, if we receive the grant funds to deliver the ground redevelopment, which is already in our capital works budget for next year anyway, so it would just certainly help to go towards that. And obviously help our clubs in the process, which I think we all need to be very conscious of and proactive about, in particular this year after last year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharpe. Councillor Adams, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, just with regards to the JA Fullerton Community Pavilion project, really happy to support the motion for the resubmission. The facilities are really tired and need an upgrade, so it would be fantastic to see that delivered soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Byrne.
Thanks, Mayor. Just really quickly, just to touch on point C, which I definitely agree with. We just have to be mindful that the JA Fullerton Pavilion is in our long-term capital works plan at this point. And obviously we're a new council, so things might change, but not until 2027 to 28. So I suppose the reputational risk we have is that if we were to get a particularly small amount of money as opposed to 90%, it's always give and take in council. So point C, I suppose, just has that clause saying that if it was $100,000 of the 7.2 million, then we will have to have some appropriate stakeholder conversations and probably some difficult conversations in terms of what we do going forward. But fingers crossed that we get 90% and we'll make the decision a lot easier. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? If not, as there was no dissent, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. That ends our council reports, so we move to item 11, notices of motion. We have 6 notices of motion on the agenda tonight. Now call on Councillor Isa to present her notice of motion titled Council's Planning Process.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move that Council requests the Chief Executive Officer to prepare a report within 3 months outlining the existence of barriers preventing installation of solar panels in heritage areas and potential solutions, in brackets as identified in MV 2040 Action Plan Green, close brackets.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Bedio. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to your notice of motion?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Bedio, for seconding my motion. The motion that appeared in the agenda was slightly longer. Just by way of quick explanation, points A and B, there's some overlap there with item 11.4 on the agenda, and items D and E, looking at some other ways of addressing those particular concerns that I'd raised in those points. So I'm just going to speak quickly to item C. Now, we do have relatively low uptake of rooftop solar in Moonee Valley, unfortunately. We've only got 12% compared to Brimbank at 18% and some other councils nearby at above 20%. Now, obviously, heritage isn't the only reason for low uptake, and so there are other things that perhaps we can continue to look at. But we do know that rooftop solar is one of, if not the most effective action that an individual household can take to reduce community emissions. And the process for installing, obviously there's a cost involved, and that's one of the issues, but the process for installing rooftop solar is quite simple unless your home is in a heritage overlay area, and in that case you need to apply for a permit under certain conditions. Now, in the Council's MV 2040 Action Plan Green, there is at item 6 the action to, except I've just closed it on my computer magically, item 6, the action to look into this issue, to look at to report back on the barriers that the planning scheme presents, and most importantly, what solutions there might be. The action plan schedules that for 2022 to 25. My notice of motion is effectively asking if we can start that immediately. We all know that planning amendments and planning changes take quite some time, and if we are to achieve the targets that we've set for reducing our community emissions, and if we are to act on our climate emergency commitments, the sooner that we can get some indications as to how we can address this particular issue, the sooner that we can put in place some solutions. Now, we know that some of those solutions rest, in fact, potentially at the state level. But that then will require some lobbying, some advocacy from Moonee Valley Council, potentially in conjunction with other councils, to try to work out what we can do. In 2018, there were some clauses introduced into the state planning scheme that require permits where panels are visible in heritage overlay areas. Now, applying for a permit doesn't preclude being granted a permit, but the decision guidelines for that are quite conservative in terms of what heritage considerations councils then need to identify in making the decision as to whether to grant the permit. Now, some councils, City of Port Phillip, City of Yarra, Byrne, I've had a look at some of the ways that they're trying to massage that and look for creative ways to make it easier, looking at adjustments that can be made to the local heritage policy that make it clear that council does really encourage solar panels where there's no other option. And we know that solar panel technology is getting better all the time, and we're almost at the point where hopefully we might be able to have panels that are so integrated into the fabric of a rooftop that...
Plenty of time. You got another minute,
so the clock says 0 and it's thrown me somewhat. I'll finish soon. We're almost at the point where we may be able to paint photovoltaic cells. We may be able to have them within the fabric such that the aesthetic value of a heritage streetscape and home is really not compromised, and can't wait till we get to that. In the interim, though, we have people in Moonee Valley who do want to put panels on their roofs and are prevented from doing so because of our heritage planning, and whatever solutions we can come up with that might make it easier for people, I'd love to see us act on that as soon as we possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Bedio, would you like to speak to the motion?
I don't have much further to add. Reading through MB 2040 in the Green Action Plan, Action 13.1.2 specifically states that Council should support the community to invest in solar systems and renewable energy technologies. The planning scheme and certain elements of that with what Rose has discussed does seem at odds to that, so I think identifying those barriers to work out how we can empower the Green Action Plan is a great thing, so I look forward to reading this report.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Isa, for bringing the motion forward. I just wanted to make the point and reiterate Councillor Isa's passion for the project, and to note that our heritage is certainly a very important thing for our community and for this council, and that this motion, I don't think threatens that in any way, and understanding, the basis for the significance of our heritage overlays and finding ways that we can benefit from advances in technology and find ways to protect our environment alongside our built heritage, I think is a really important aspect of this motion, so happy to support.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? If not, as there was no dissent, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. We now move to item 11.2, and I'll call on Councillor Sharpe to present her notice of motion titled Sport Requirements.
Thank you, Mayor. So I would like to move the Council resolves to consider, as part of its mid-year financial review, A, installation of a 1.5 metre high fence adjacent to the Cross Keys Pavilion along the western edge of the grounds closest to the pavilion, in consultation with the soccer club as soon as possible. Point B, installation of a storage shed to the Aberfeldy Park West ground adjacent to the Oval, in consultation with the cricket club as soon as possible. And C, installation of a storage shed at Cross Keys Reserve in consultation with the soccer club as soon as possible.
Thank you, Councillor Sharpe. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Tyson. Councillor Sharpe, would you like to speak to your notice of motion?
Thank you. There's been some requests through from clubs. I might go through point by point because it's probably a bit easier. The Cross Keys Pavilion was only built a year and a half probably ago. It was completed. There's spectator seating along the very at the bottom of the pavilion with no fencing separating the seating from the pitch. Over the holidays, I've driven around pretty much every single ground within Moonee Valley to have a look and compare what other grounds have. Every other ground is fenced off, particularly fenced off for spectators. From what I understand, a lot of kids sit on the ground too and watch the game, and I'm very fearful that a wild ball or cricket ball or anything like that could come and hit straight into the crowd if they're sitting on those seats without a fence being there. So I think it's really, really important. I think it's definitely a safety issue, and like I said, every other ground within Moonee Valley is fenced. Point B, installation of a storage shed at Aberfeldy Park West grounds. The cricket, most of us met down there a couple of weeks ago, and I know a couple of us have been in contact with the cricket ladies, women's cricket ladies. They are desperate to have a storage shed located closer to their pavilion, just for the storage of. I know they've got a roller, but other things as well. And I know there's a bit of a hill to get up to their pavilion, and the storage area in that pavilion, the base of that pavilion. So it could potentially be an issue. So all they need is a storage shed, and they'd like it close to the Oval, which is why I put in the point there adjacent to the Oval. Point C, a similar issue, storage shed at Cross Keys Reserve. Look, we've built a brand new pavilion 18 months ago, and it was built for soccer and cricket. For some strange reason, the storage facilities that were built aren't conducive to the sporting equipment that is used by soccer. So unfortunately, I think it's just a bit of a fail in the design, so to speak, in that part of the pavilion. So if you go down to Cross Keys, look, we all want to see our parks and our reserves look as best as they can, but having the soccer infrastructure strewn all around the ground really doesn't look great. And it's also open to vandalism and all the rest of it as well. So storage shed down there I think is quite important, hence point C. And I've put these up because I think based on last year, obviously, and a lot of things that we do this year are going to be trying to, alleviate the pain caused by COVID with various clubs and all the rest of it from last year. But, most of us were at the Australia Day breakfast, and we heard from Strathmore Community Bank that obviously really in touch with our community groups and all of our clubs, and the rep even said then that, all of our clubs and community groups have really been hit hard. So I think anything that we can do as a council to help, these are only small things. They are safety issues, and I think we just really need to be conscious of the fact that the people that are involved in these clubs, it's so important for their mental health, physical health and everything like that, and we just need to do whatever we can do. And like I said, these are pretty small things, and I would hope to see that we can discuss this as part of the mid-year financial review in a month or so, and look forward to nutting out these issues, I guess.
Thank you, Councillor Sharpe. Councillor Tyson, do you want to speak to the motion?
I don't have much to add, Mayor, but it was great to meet with the Eastern Maribyrnong Park Ladies Cricket Club a few weeks ago, and from what I understand, their issue with the roller was solved, but they've got a few issues with their cricket ground cupboards, and it presents a lot of occupational health and safety issues, and we don't want anyone to get hurt. So, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm supportive of this motion, but it will be interesting to see exactly where more of the storage sheds will be. I suppose my first read of it, I thought that they were going to be close or almost attached to the pavilions as such. But if they're in the middle of a ground for convenience, how that the aesthetics of that and the potential impact on other users will also be something that just has to be worked through, I think, and there would probably be a way that it could be done that it could be quite artistic and quite nice, as opposed to just a really ugly box sitting in the middle of some of our open space. But I'm happy for the conversation to occur, and we can see where it leads. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Any other? Councillor Isa?
I'm also happy to support the motion. I do just have a query about the 1.5 metres. I'm not much shorter or taller than 1.5 metres. I'm not sure that I would necessarily see over a 1.5 metre fence, so I'm not quite sure, but happy to support the resolution, and then understanding that this will come back for further discussion and consideration in the mid-year financial review.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? If not, as there was no dissent, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Item 11.3, I'll call on Councillor Sharpe to present her notice of motion titled Covenant Planning Matters.
Thank you, Mayor. So it is my intention to move that when planning matters relating to restrictive covenants are being decided, Council should consider giving regard to the use of a lawyer experienced in restrictive covenants as they relate to planning, to provide advice on the application and/or be involved in any related VCAT hearing.
Thank you, Councillor Sharpe. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Hodgson. Both went up at exactly the same time. Councillor Sharpe, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you. Just quickly, there's a number of single dwelling covenants within Strathmore, and over the years there've certainly been a lot of bites at the cherry, so to speak, to try and negate that single dwelling covenant. There was an application a number of years ago in Woodland Street, down the end of Woodland Street, whereby the covenant may not have been interpreted quite so specifically, and hence information provided may have not been as accurate as maybe it may have been. So unfortunately that decision has pretty much sent the residents in Strathmore and around that area on a hell of a ride through VCAT and Supreme Court, and the case is still going. So this motion is really just all about making sure that if there is an application that comes before us that relates to covenants in any way, shape or form, obviously I'm more aware of the single dwelling covenants just being Strathmore as part of Buckley Ward, but we just need to be open-minded about using experienced people professionals that are experienced in covenant law. It's pretty self-explanatory, no real more detail other than that. But in gaining that information and experience from the lawyer experienced in restrictive covenants, obviously, you'd hope that you'd expect that information provided to us and residents would be able to be relied upon solely and wholeheartedly. So I hope that can be something to take into account in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Sharpe.
Thank you.
Councillor Hodgson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have much to add. I would just say that it's, as Councillor Sharpe's outlined, it's a very complex area, and anything that we can do to support our planning team and in turn council to make robust decisions, I think is in the best interests of our community.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? If not, as there was no dissent, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Item 11.4, I'll call on Councillor Bettio to present his notice of motion titled Improving the Efficiency of Planning at Moonee Valley City Council.
Thank you, Mayor. Noting that 45% of planning matters in 2019-2020 were not decided within the statutory timeframe, I move that A, the Chief Executive Officer prepares a report within 3 months investigating the efficiencies and deficiencies of the Planning Department at Moonee Valley City Council. The report should include the following: an audit on all planning applications that were not decided within the statutory timeframe, 60 planning days, over the past 24 months, entirety of 2019 and 2020. Identifying the particular types of planning applications that have experienced delays and specific reasons for delays. Identifying key reasons that applications were delayed. Identifying all applications that had been forwarded to the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal under Section 79 of the Planning and Environment Act and associated costs to Council. A comprehensive list of suggested amendments and improvements to Council's planning framework, including streamlining and updating the delegation schedule and statutory planning protocols to enable 80% of applications to be decided within the 60 statutory days if a report to Council is not triggered. The above report should include an investigation and list of recommendations for the following: the introduction of a small business fast-track application process that targets small and medium-sized businesses who wish to lodge a planning application. The process should be a partnership between the Planning Department and the Economic Development of Council to encourage new and renewed investment and local employment, whilst further developing the variety and vibrancy of a thriving commercial sector. This initiative should be an expansion of the existing partnership Small Business Engagement Program, as it's also called. Any application submitted as part of the Small Business Fast Track application should be decided within 1, 30 days if the application does not require advertising or a referral to an external authority and is consistent with the existing policy directives of the location. 2, 60 days if the application requires advertising and or referral to an external authority and does not trigger a report to Council.
Thank you, Councillor Bettio. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Tyson. Councillor Bettio, would you like to speak to the motion?
Aside from maybe rubbish collection in kindergartens, planning is perhaps the most notable of council services, and often planning is not portrayed in a positive light. Make no mistake, planning is a difficult beast. It is beholden to a raft of legislation and red tape, perhaps more so than any other department within council. At Moonee Valley, we're lucky to have such a dedicated and hard-working planning department. However, as a growing city, with more and more local development underway, our planners are facing an influx of workload, and as such, this affects their ability to deliver decisions in a timely manner. Now, it's easy to correlate planning with the larger developments in our municipality: townhouses, apartment blocks, racecourses, and the like. However, planning can sometimes be involved in matters as small as upgrading the front fence of your home to use applications for local business. Most of us will find that we will have to contact planning at some point. To that end, it is important to consider the human aspect of planning. The family who has saved for years to redevelop their home, or the couple who have put their life savings into opening a business. For these people, delays are not just a minor setback, it could be the final blow between them and their dream. Often delays mean more rent without income, payments to builders, mortgages, etc. This is why improving the efficiency of our planning department is so crucial, and it is important to consider this when we look to improve our planning processes. Given the uncertain year our small business community has just faced, we must do our best as a council to provide as much certainty and support as we can. Of course, any planner will tell you there is no certainty in planning. However, what I hope to provide through this small business fast track application is a transparent timeline and consultative approach that encourages new investment in line with local planning policy, but also provides an opportunity for existing business to enhance their offerings and adapt to a new normal.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Councillor Tyson, do you wish to speak to this motion?
I think Councillor Bedio covered it very well, and I know that it's something that a lot of residents came to him during his election campaign. And I'd just add as well that even in the last 24 hours, I've had a local business contact me on similar veins of this, and I think our planning team do a fantastic job, but if we're having a look at anything that we can improve or tinker around the edges would be great.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Byrne.
Mayor, I don't need to speak to the motion, but before we put it to the vote, I was wondering if we should have a 5-minute adjournment whilst we wait for a councillor to return, as we're one short.
Look, I believe we still have a quorum, so we may proceed. I appreciate the suggestion, but I think we will just proceed, but thank you for the suggestion. As there was no dissent, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Item 11.5 is, I'll call on Councillor Bedio to present his notice of motion titled Developing Our Live Music Scene.
Thank you, Mayor. My intention to move that Council resolves to request the Chief Executive Officer to prepare a report within 3 months outlining the following: identifying public spaces within the municipality that could be used by artists, bands, community groups, businesses, council to host regular live music offerings that can be attended by patrons. B, identifying any environmental and amenity concerns that are prevalent at each respective site and ways to alleviate said concerns.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Sharpe. Councillor Bedio, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I believe the motion is quite straightforward, but as a city, I guess if we were to compare ourselves to our neighbours, our municipal neighbours, if we look to Maribyrnong, they're known for festivals such as St Jerome's Laneway, Moreland, Brunswick Music Festival, and of course City of Melbourne hosts a myriad of festivals and events across the year. Despite the inherent lack of such events in our city is home to a raft of talented performers. So I think identifying key public spaces to hold events and festivals is a first step to opening up and developing our performing arts scene.
Thanks, Councillor Bedio. Councillor Sharpe.
Thank you, Mayor. I love your initiative, Councillor Bedio, on this. I remember years ago, I'm trying to think what year, but it was probably 13, 14 or 15, so quite a few years ago, we used to have a youth festival, a youth band, an array of bands here in Queen's Park every year. I can't remember the name of it, but it used to be absolutely huge. People would flock to it. I saw Birds of Tokyo in Queen's Park, and they're huge, and that was when they weren't huge. So I just remember the vibe was intense. It was just awesome, and it just used to be fantastic. We also used to have Battle of the Bands once a year, and we also used to take part in an Eisteddfod type thing that used to be local, then got moved to Festival Hall. And anyway, we've done a lot of things over the years, but it really has gone off the wall for probably the last 5 or 6 years, which is a shame. So I'm wholeheartedly behind this motion. I love live music. I am a live music junkie. I enjoy going to any band that I can see. So I was very upset with COVID last year. So no, look forward to seeing the report, and really well done. It's a great initiative.
Thank you, Councillor Sharpe. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, and I also really pleased to see a motion like this. Thank you, Councillor Bedio. I think that as a city we cater really well to a lot of sections of our community, and hopefully this one will expand our offerings into a new section of engaging our youth and you know, people like myself and Councillor Sharpe who also love to see live music. So I'm really looking forward to the report.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? If not, as there was no dissent, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. I think Councillor Isa was out for a conflict for 11.5, so we'll just wait for Councillor Isa to return. We now move to item 11.6, and I'll call on Councillor Bedio to present his notice of motion titled Developing Our Street Art Scene.
This is my last one. Is my intention that we request the Chief Executive Officer to prepare a report within 3 months outlining the following. A. Ways in which street art could be better incorporated into our planning processes with special regard to the protection of heritage buildings and neighbourhood amenity.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Adams. Councillor Bedio, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be brief again. Again, I believe the motion is quite straightforward. I wholeheartedly believe that street art, when implemented correctly, can boost the vibrancy and life of our streetscapes. There's numerous examples across Melbourne where effective street art supports and helps grow our commercial and our local economy. So through this report, I hope to identify how we can better incorporate street art into our streetscapes, whilst also empowering our local artists to get involved and get behind that. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Councillor Adams, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Happy to second this motion. Thank you, Councillor Bedio, for bringing this forward. Street art contributes to a vibrant culture, which I think is lacking in parts of Moonee Valley. It can transform dull parts of a city and contribute to creative ambience and local identity. If it's done in a way that complements existing streetscape and amenity, street art can engage the community, increase foot traffic, support the arts and our local artists who need our support, and increase the overall attractiveness of activity centres. So I look forward to seeing this report. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Any other councillor? Councillor Isa?
Yeah, thanks so much for bringing this, Councillor Bedio. Many people in Moonee Ward were very sad when the lovely street art that was on the side of Madura Street, on the side of the cafe there, disappeared one summer, and I'm not sure whether it disappeared because of heritage issues or whether there were other reasons for that, but it was a beautiful creative contribution to the streetscape. So I look forward to seeing perhaps how, again, the balance between heritage aesthetics and also creativity and artwork can be better incorporated within our municipality. I would also, not necessarily as part of this motion, but the protection then of that street art from tagging, which is often a bit of an issue. There was some beautiful street art, I think, I'm just not sure of the location, that was tagged over the weekend. I saw some pictures on social media, and 10 years, or it was 13 years ago, on my previous council term, the Ascot Vale Kindergarten worked with Vic Track and Mount Alexander College to produce a beautiful mural. The Year 7 and 8 students created a beautiful mural on the back of Ascot Vale Kindergarten on the Vic Track land. It lasted less than a week before it was graffitied and tagged, and the students at the college were devastated. The kindergarten, they painted a beautiful child-friendly mural. So a way that we can then protect artwork and make sure that we think ahead in that regard, I'd really welcome as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? If not, as there was no dissent, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Item 12 on the agenda is urgent business. Councillors, do we have any urgent business? If not, we'll move to item 13, confidential reports, and there are no confidential reports this evening. So that concludes our business on tonight's agenda. We thank everyone watching the live stream. Next month, our meetings return to Tuesdays, with our next scheduled ordinary meeting of Council to be held at 6:30 p.m. on Tuesday, the 9th of February. I now declare this meeting closed. Good night.